Hello, we are in Balak Torah portion. Balak Torah portion is a unique Torah portion. It is maybe the only portion in the Torah that is not something that we read that is happening to the children of Israel inside their camp or inside the nation itself, but it's a portion in which we see something that is happening beyond what the children of Israel can see, something that happens to the nations near them, something that happens to kings and people that are not even Israelis and that are not Jewish, and they don't perceive God as the God of the children of Israel even. We in this Torah portion we have a look at the pagan gentle mindset, I guess you can call it like this. We enter the realms of ancient magicians and sorcerers. We even see some sort of a spiritual warfare going on. This portion asks us to make a psycho literary analysis because it is a story that is going on in the unconscious, let's say, world of the children of Israel. They are not knowing nothing of the things that happen in this portion. They have no idea that this story is happening, but this story is happening anyway. We receive in this portion a look or a peek through the veils to what goes behind the scenes with Israel while they're sitting in some sort of peace and without hindrance. So we read that Balak, the king of Moab, is dreading Israel after he hears and sees about what happened to the Og, the king of Bashan, and to Sichon, king of the Amori. And while Israel was winning battles with those huge, very powerful, strong kings, and then he's scared that they would come and attack him and his people on the way to conquer the promised land. So he sends people, messengers, to Midian, which usually Midian and Moab were enemies to each other. They never goes along together. And now here, to make war with a third party, they are collaborating their forces. And that's like an interesting thing here to see, that enemies sometimes can have peace in order to have war against somebody else. So he sends people, Balak, the king of Moab, sends people to Bilam. The king, Bilam was a sorcerer, an expert sorcerer back in the days, that he would be maybe enough talented to help him curse the children of Israel or do some sorcery to them in order for them not to be able to conquer him as well. Now they said, commentators said, that there never arise someone like Moshe in terms of prophecy, and that is correct. So in the Israeli nation never did arise a prophet like Moshe, but amongst the other nation that did, there was Bilam, the sorcerer. He was well known. So the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian went with magic charms in their hands, and they came to Bilam and conveyed Balak's message to him, saying, "A people is come out from Egypt, and behold, they have covered the eye of the land, and they are stationed in front of me." Now Balak, king of Moab, is afraid that those people are going to fight now against him and win the war against him, just like they did with Og and with Sichon. So Balak, let's look a bit about Balak's character. Who was it? Who was this magician? So the Zohar is telling us Ben Tzipor. We know Balak Ben Tzipor. Tzipor in Hebrew translation is a bird. Why is Balak the son of a bird? Let's find out through the Zohar's scriptures. Kemo de'amu, but Ben Tzipor mamash, he was the son of a bird literally. De'acharashoy havo b'chama zinin de'ahu tzipor. נטיל ציפור מקשקש באיסבה, מפרח באווירה, ודובדין ולחיש לחישי. וההוא ציפור הבאתי, וההוא איסבה ופומי, ומצפצפה קמי, והאילי בכלוב חד. מקטר כתרין קמי, ואיהו עודלי כמה מילין. אבית חרשוי ומצפצף העופה, ופרח וטס לגבי גלוי עיניים, ועודלי, ואיהו עתי, וכל מילוי בההוא ציפור הבו. So he took this bird that he had, Later, the Zohar will say that this bird was made out of gold, silver, and metal, and that was a handmade bird. Balak made it, and then he used magic to give it life. So he took this bird, then shake the grass, blew the air, and worked his magic, whispering spells, and the bird came with knowledge to him. And then he put the bird in a cage and burned incense to it, and the bird informed him even more information about what is to come. And he would send this bird that was wandered around wherever he sent it her, and then the bird was returning to him with information about what's going on and what is about to happen, where is the danger lays, and so forth. יום אחד עבד עובדוי ונטיל lahu ציפור. One day he did his magics as usual. He made his work and he took this bird. ופרח והזיל והתעכב. And the bird was delayed and didn't came back as usual. ולא עתה. And he didn't came back at all. So he was, Balak was sorry in his soul. הווה מצטער בנפשי. עד דעתה. Once the bird came, חמה חד של הובה דאשה דתסה ותרי. Balak saw a flame of fire running after his bird, והוקיד גדפוי, and burning its wings. כדין חממה דחמה ודחיל מקמה יהודי ישראל. Because this flame of fire came out from the camp of Israel after his bird. The bird was trying to run away from it, but the flame of fire burned his wings. Mashmei de'ahu tzipor yadua, and the bird's name was Yadua. Yadua in Hebrew is from the word yada, meaning knowledge. וכל אינון דמשמשי ויד אי לשמשי באהו ציפור, לא יד אי חרשוי כמה דאבה ידען בלק. And all the people who would use this magic of the bird didn't do it good as Balak was. He was the world's expert when it comes to this bird magic. And all the wisdom that he had came out from this bird. And this bird he would know and work. And now, as we see, the bird didn't have wings anymore, and that was due to the nation of Israel. So he knew what he was afraid of. And he knew the power of Israel is also a power of magic, and not only natural forces that can win the war against the kings. And therefore he sent a delegation of elder people to Bilam to curse them, combining the magician and sorcerer powers together. Now let's look a bit about the genealogy of those two, Balak and Bilam. Balak is the descendant of Lot. Lot, which Abraham saved from Sodom and Gomorrah. If you remember, God remembered Abraham when Sodom and Gomorrah happened, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot dwelt. So in a way, Lot and the descendants of Lot owes their lives to the Abraham's children, meaning the children of Israel. Still, he wanted to curse them and kill them. Bilam was a descendant of the wicked Lavan. So he also had an unfinished business with Israel. Because if you remember, when Jacob, his wife, and his wives and the children flee from Lavan's house, Rachel, one of the daughters, one of the wives, took the teraphim, the idols, or with either magical power or sacred status that Lavan used in order to make his magic and divination. So even though both Balak and Bilam in a way were relatives to the children of Israel, still they feared them to the point that they asked to curse them and to kill them. Balak held the power of magic, while Bilam had the power of sorcery. Magic is something done with the fingers, with the hands. As we know, this bird, he was making this bird. He blew something in the air. He took the grass. He burned incense. While sorcery is more a matter of charms, spells, it's something to do with the mouth. So Balak knew that his magic is good for one thing, but he needs the sorcery of Bilam in order to make his powers even stronger, or he needed a combination of those two, the combined knowledge of a magician and a sorcerer in order to make something that can actually influence this nation of Israel, which is obviously receiving a lot of help from the above realms. So when Balak people came to Bilam, he tell them that they will stay the night and that in the morning he will tell them what God tells him to do, such a believer. And God said to Balak to Bilam in the night, "You shall not go with them, you shall not curse the people because they are blessed." So literally, Bilam is receiving the request from Hashem not to go and curse the people because he will not succeed because they are blessed. So when Bilam arrives in the morning, he said to Balak, "Nobles, return to your country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you." But Balak then continued to send more respected and more honored delegations to Bilam, asking him, "Please do not hesitate to come to me, for I will honor you greatly and do whatever you tell me to do. So please come and curse these people for me." And Bilam answered and said unto the servants of Balak, the second delegation, "Even if Balak would give me his house full of silver and gold, I cannot go beyond the words of my Lord, my God, to do anything small or great." And so, but at the end, he's convinced because he cannot stand against the honor and the greatness and the power and the gifts and the materialism profit that he can gain out of it. And he is deciding to go with the delegation of Balak and go to curse the children of Israel. And then he comes to Bilam comes to Balak, and both of them together go. They would go together to 3 mountain high vantage points from where they could see the children of Israel and curse them as they were planning to do. On those 3 attempts, Balak and Bilam sacrificed 7 oxes and 7 rams, a total of 42 sacrifices. Now, the spiritual Jewish Kabbalistic teachings, everybody that learns them, everybody that knows a bit, knows that 42 number is one of God's name. It's Anabekoach. It's a very huge, very powerful, great prayer and a powerful, great one of God's names. It's the name of judgment and law and might and strength. And so we understand that those guys had the knowledge of magician and sorcerers, and they were also aware of the mystical spiritual surrounding in which they were. So they were not just people. They knew exactly what they are doing, and they really planned on succeeding in this mission that they took upon themselves. Still, every time, instead of Balaam receiving a prophecy that would curse the children of Israel, the prophecy was one of a blessing, meaning that in a way God turned him into some sort of an instrument to bless his nation, to bless the children of Israel. So powerful were those blessings that they are recorded in the Torah for eternity, and are even, they are, you can say, the strongest, most cryptic prophecies we have as Jewish people regarding the end of times and the coming of the Mashiach. And those blessings are even have their place in our prayers every now and then. So this portion in a way teaches us that all men, including magicians and sorcerers, are subject to the will of God. And once they use their sorcery given to them in bad ways, then not only that they will not succeed, their powers will work against them eventually. Now let's see what do we have in this portion, and behind the fact that this portion is talking about what's going on at the out of the conscience of the children of Israel, which is something that is interesting by itself. We have here a lot of references to eyes and to knowledge. Let's start with the eyes. First, we have at the beginning, when Balak sees the children of Israel, he sees them and they're covering the eye of the earth. Second of all, we see that Bilam, the sorcerer, according to Commander Torah, he was the Shtum Ein, he was the guy without one eye. The Zohar will explain to us later that this thing with his eye was an intention thing, because in order to have to receive the power of prophecy, a person needs to be in a way pure and worthy for those powers. And Bilam was the complete opposite from someone that is pure and worthy. He was evil, he was bad, he was impure. He and so God had to take one of his eyes, to remove one of his eyes. And so the only eye that he didn't had was the eye, like the pure eye, or the eye that in which he could see things and he could work his sorcery and receive his prophecy. So we see here that eyes are an important thing. Also, now we just said that they were going on 3 mountains using 3 high vantage points in order to see the children of Israel. Only if they could see the children of Israel, they would be able to curse them, also that this is what they believed. So here is like a little understanding about the importance or the refers of eyes, or the seeing that we have in this portion. Now let's go to the knowledge. Bilam said on himself, Yodea Da'at Elyon, he knows the vision of the Almighty, the person with the great insight, claiming who knows everything, that he's knowing everything, and therefore he's the only thing that can help Balak, the king of Moab, to do whatever he wants. We also have Balak's bird, Yadoa, the knowledge, the bird the name of the bird, Yadoa, knowledge. So we can see here that we have the knowledge, or the supposed knowledge and seeing abilities of those sorcerer and magician, in contrast to the fact that the children of Israel are not able to see what's going on in this portion and are not aware at any point of what's going on in this portion. They tried. We also have knowledge is also one of the sefirot, is the of da'at, the knowledge sefirah. It's chokhmah, bina, v'da'at. Chokhmah, wisdom, bina, more profound ability of thinking and executing wisdom. And then we have the da'at, which is like taking those two together and makes our ability of knowing. Now Moshe, we all know, was the da'at, the knowledge of the tree of life. But we're not going to get inside of this. All we can say about this is that here we have 2 people that are trying to take the position that Moshe was in, and to, in a way, he was the great leader prophet. So they tried to take his place in the knowledge tree of life. But the thing is that they came from the wrong side of things, meaning their domain was this of impurity. And when Bilam was speaking, he was not able, he did have a spiritual knowledge, but the high knowledge that he had was the knowledge of impurity, that God has allowed to govern part of nature. But there is the above nature, and there is the above powers of God that are not in nature, and those powers are not powers that an impure person can enter and rely on. However, this power of Bilam, the power of impurity, it has no independent authority at all. It was an angel. It was an agent of Hashem. So in a way, that we see that there was a necessity for Balaam to become the instrument of God, but he didn't receive the powers that he think that he had. He had extreme forces. In prophecy, we see here a man that have it all. Like, he's a great sorcerer, have great powers of prophecy, but what does he do with them? He's choosing to do harm with them. He's trying to curse people with them. Instead of, if a person receives power that are so great, that are so beyond nature, what he needs to do is to do good with them. He needs to know how to bless with them. So we can see that spiritual insight cannot be separated from its conduct, from the from the person that holds it. And we know that spirituality in Judaism is not only a high that you need to come to and then let go. It's a way of living. It's something that you need to do in day-to-day life. This is not something that you can ignore. You can't have prophecies or spiritual power and just decide that you're not going to deal with them and that you don't want to mess with them or that you want to do bad with them. You have a responsibility once you do this. So as those seeking spiritual experience must realize that this should lead them to a deeper commitment to moral life, to be good people, to help other people, to use those powers that they have in a good way. And that also we can see that that spiritual powers in any message make the message stronger, make the message more solid, and therefore maybe we need to learn that we can always use spiritual message in the message to our families, to our children, to our relatives, to our friends, because spiritual knowledge and sight is something that we need to, in a way, if we have the ability of seeing things beyond what's been seen, then we need to address it and we need to use it, and we need to choose the right way to use this, the pure way to use this, the good way to use this. And therefore the Shabbat light in this portion is the one of prophecy in a way. But we need to understand that the prophecy or whatever ability that in spiritual or beyond nature that we have must be suitable to a person that is worthy to those powers. And there is another important thing in this portion, as we said at the beginning, that this portion is happening outside of the camp of Israel, meaning this portion happens to the children of Israel, but without their knowledge, without their ability to see things. So in this week, there might have been happening things will happen behind the scenes for us. We will not be able to see things. We will not be able to understand things, but still, God is devotional. And he's devoted to the people of Israel, and he's devotional is great when it comes to the people that he cares about, that he loves, and that he's cherishing. And he's doing beyond what we are even can imagine that he can do. And so we need to trust the divine, and we need to see the fact that we're not see. If you remember, the knowledge and the sight of Balak and Bilam did not help them, because it was like thin air against the unknowledge and the not being able to see powers that Israel has done. So maybe sometimes it's better not to know and not to see, or maybe to surrender to the notion of that we cannot see and that we cannot be aware of what's happening. But things will happen, and things happening even behind the scenes, even when we can't consciously aware of them, even in the unconscious of ourselves, things are happening in upper realms and lower realms and around us. So we must trust the divine devotion towards us, and just learn from those people, Bilam and Balak, what we shouldn't do, and learn about the peace and calmness that Israel were in during this portion, that even though we cannot see and we cannot hear and we do not know, still we are trusting that the divine God is devotional towards us and will help us go through every obstacle we have. So have Shabbat Shalom, and I hope to see you next week.